The Rebel Capitalist Show.
All right, guys, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome someone back to the Rebel Capitalist Show. He is my good buddy and fellow lover of liberty.
Yes.
His name is Mark Moss. Mark, welcome back to the Rebel Capitalist Show, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much, George. Always a pleasure sitting down with you. We've had several conversations, and I always look forward to every single one.
Yeah, for sure. You're in your bunker, your hideout in Puerto Rico, your surfing hideout.
I am, man. I am. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I've built my career on a thesis that money goes where it's treated best. And
Yeah,
now
right.
I'm trying to live that I need to go where I'm treated best. And so, unfortunately, I'm a man on the run, and I'm trying to figure out what to optimize for. Right now, I'm optimizing more for tax efficiency, not so much for liberty, but I'm going to be, shifting those optimizations around as needed.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is you and I are kind of doing the opposite right now, in the sense that I went to Puerto Rico in 2013 for the tax efficiency that you're referring to. And I was just going to go back there. I was there a couple weeks ago and I just couldn't take it. So I left after about 24 hours. And now I'm trying to more so focus on the freedom and liberty side of the equation.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too far off topic there. Before we hit the record button, you were talking about some ideas that you've had about cycles.
Yeah.
And I think they were incredibly interesting. So can you dive into that a little bit further?
Yeah, for sure. I think cycles are very powerful. There's all different types of cycles. I think that, I've been asked many times by younger people, and what's the rules for success, and how do you find balance?
Yeah,
How do you find balance? And I believe that life is about living out of balance. You seek balance, but you're out of balance at different times. So right now I'm optimizing for tax efficiency. I'm out of balance with my liberty. All right.
Right.
But I'm gonna make more money, and that more money is gonna give me more options. And then I'll take that more money, that more options, and then I'll go optimize for more freedom. Right. So it's like I'm out of balance, but I'm seeking balance at the same time. So we kind of have these seasons. The Bible talks about seasons, the law of sowing and reaping. You sow and then you reap. And King Solomon in Ecclesiastes, the wisest man in the world, said that there's a season for everything. And so, we can see 4-year presidential cycles. There's business cycles and credit cycles, and there's all these different cycles. And a lot of it, we were talking about before, history and understand history, because history, it repeats. I mean, Mark Twain said it doesn't repeat, it rhymes. But it kind of does repeat, and whatever you want to call it, repeat, rhyme. So there's these cycles, and there's 3 cycles that I've been tracking. And what happens is, like I said, there's all these different durations. So there's 1 year and 4 year and 7 year and 90 year and all these different durations. But when they all start converging at the same time, then really, really powerful things start to happen. And, if you watch my videos on my YouTube channel, Mark Moss, by the way, let me plug that. My focus is about money and economics, macroeconomics, but also like social economics, because it's all intertwined in there. And so there's a couple cycles that I've been tracking. So one of them was really outlined in a book called The Pendulum. And it's a great book, and it's like a pendulum swinging back and forth, if you would imagine it like that. And it's an 80-year cycle. And in the book, they did an amazing job. They traced it back thousands of years, and they give you all the examples of it swinging each time. But it basically swings from what they call a we cycle. We would be us together. We're all in this together. Collectivism, globalism, centralization, central planning, right? We. And then it swings back to a me. They call it me, which is individualism or decentralization. And again, you can trace this back thousands of years. I'm not going to go back thousands of years, but the last time we were at the peak me was, I think, 1941, 44, in that area, which, if anyone knows anything about history, you know that was the end of World War II. That was the creation of the UN. That was when the EU was getting formed. That was when Bretton Woods and our global monetary system was formed, and all of those things. So you can
IMF and the
see
World Bank too. Yeah.
the IMF, yeah, all that, right? So you can see the power, but that was when it got created, right? And so then the pendulum's been swinging, and I think you can easily see that we're peak globalism right now, where the IMF, the three-letter agencies, the NGOs are running the world at this point. You know, the WF, World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization. I unveiled a new one on my channel a couple weeks ago, the WMO. Most people haven't heard of the World Meteorological Association, or WMO organization.
Right.
And that's what's running the IPCC, selling carbon credits, and the whole climate change and all that.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so that's another one that most people, I unveiled that one. It was pretty deep, but so you can see that these organizations were formed, and now we're peak globalism, and it's really pretty evident to see. A couple of quick examples would be, before the pandemic, there was, I think, 8 different countries around the globe that had over 1 million people each in the streets protesting. I mean, it was massive. It started with the Yellow Jackets in France,
Right.
but then it was all over the world: Lebanon and Argentina, Hong Kong.
Chile, didn't it? Chile. Remember
Yeah, I think Chile, right? So there's like 8 different countries, 1 million people each protesting. Other examples would be, you know, Brexit, right? Brexit's trying to leave the EU, and Donald Trump was definitely a symptom or a sign of that, right? Rejecting the establishment. And so we're at peak globalism right now, and it's time, as history tells us, for that pendulum to start swinging back, rejecting rejecting socialism, centralization. So that's one cycle. The next cycle is a 90-year cycle, and it's been highlighted in the book, the Fourth Turning.
Right.
And the quick example, and I think you've covered it on one of your videos before, but it's hard times bring strong men bring good times bring weak men bring bad times. And then the cycle repeats. Bad times bring strong men. So it's highlighted in that. And in that 90-year cycle, we're clearly at the end of that, and in the fourth turning, which is weak men created bad times. And so those cycles are both converging at the same time. And there's a lot to unpack into each of those, of course.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, how do you layer over Dalio's long-term debt cycle and short-term debt cycles with those social cycles you were referring to?
Yeah, I believe there's a 90-year credit cycle that also overlaps at the same time. Yeah. I haven't, there's that. I know Harry Dent also has a couple cycles that he's been talking about, and I haven't dug in to see exactly how those overlap. As I told you, this is my working thesis that I'm planning to present at your Rebel Capitalist Live. So I'm going to present the full working thesis. It's a 10-year investing thesis, and I'm going to give you the actionable steps of what you need to do to protect yourself as this plays out. But so I know, like I said, I know he has, Dalio has those. I know Harry Dent has a couple, and I believe they're intersecting at the same time. I just haven't layered those in yet. But a lot of this is, a lot of this seems very complex. And what I've always tried to do is I take these complex subjects, and you do as well in your whiteboard videos, and take these complex subjects and make them easy to understand. And I believe that these, academia economists, they try to make things very complicated, and then I don't understand it. So I'll just defer to you. You're the expert. But really, you can always break them down to their most basic. And we might call them first principles. But if you all pricing is subjective. Like pricing is set by supply and demand. Mm-hmm. Like you can come up with all the economic models in the world, tell me how pricing comes up. But at the end of the day, it's supply and demand, right? It's super basic. And then there's natural laws of the universe, like gravity, for example. And as I said, like sowing and reaping. So there's a law that says I must produce before I consume. Simple, right? But today in the fourth,
you'd think that was simple.
Well, you would think it'd be simple, right? But back to the fourth turning, the reason why we had strong men brought great times, and those great times, they were able to stockpile massive amounts of wealth. Right? They created
Right.
massive amount of prosperity and they stocked it away. Now, in the Bible, again, they talk about like 7-year like bankruptcy cycles. In the Egyptians and the Israelites, they had to stockpile 7 years of food because then there were 7 years of famine. And so they had stockpiled all this wealth, all this productivity. Those great times allowed them to do that. But today, in the fourth cycle, we're at a period where we have all of academia and government. They're people that have never produced.
Right.
All they've done is live off the production of the previous cycles, right, of the past. And so it's completely distorted their viewpoint. They have no real world understanding to like make these policies off of. And so that's what those great times brought weak men, and those weak men brought the bad times. And so it's just natural law, I believe, will always win. And so we're in that fourth cycle. The one thing that I'll add to that without going too deep into it is that what's important to understand is in the fourth cycle, in the fourth turning, it change happens really, really fast. So it goes, Vladimir Lenin said that there's decades where nothing happens, and then there's days where decades happen. And so I think he's specifically talking about the fourth turning because it's right there where like change happens. So we have this pendulum is about to swing, and like something's going to give. Like we know it, right? You're taking on the Fed. I mean, there's it's unsustainable what's happening. So something's going to give. We're at the fourth turning, which is interesting. And then the last one, the third cycle that I'm layering on right now, is something that most people don't think about because it's outside of economics and out of social economics, but it's technological cycles. And so there's been 4 technological revolutions. Now I'm talking about a revolution. I'm talking about a new technology. Like the iPhone was a new technology, but it wasn't a revolution. It was part of the 1971's telecommunications revolution. So in 1971, we got the microprocessor. The microchip allowed us to get personal computers and allow us to get phones. So it was a new technology, but it wasn't a revolution, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The revolutions are, I'll go back and recap them super fast, but in the 1700s, we had the Industrial Revolution, right? So we brought, a revolution is something that changes humanity, right? Like for since the beginning of time, people were working in the fields with their hands. And all of a sudden now we have factories. Like that was a massive shift in the world.
Yeah,
fast forwarding, we had steam engines. So people had used wind for all of humanity to get around. And now we have steam engines to transport on land, train, boat, ship, et cetera. That was a massive shift. We had, I think that was also that and in steel. Then we had electricity. So imagine the shift in humanity for that, right? Where people had lived under candle power basically their whole life.
Yeah, that's right.
And then all of a sudden they had that. 1750, the Industrial Revolution. 1800 was the steam engine and steel. So steel was also another big thing. Steel, by having that hard material, it allowed us to build giant buildings, build giant bridges, all these things. So it was steam engines and steel. 1850 was electricity, right? So that was obviously massive. People lived in darkness forever, and all of a sudden we have electricity. And then that was a revolution. And then of course, look what electricity has allowed us to do. 1900 was cars. 1908, was the car. So for all of humanity had always gone by walking or horse. And then there's cars. Then 1971 was the telecommunications, the microprocessor, which of course we just talked about. If you go back and kind of count these up, you'll notice that they're about every 50 years.
Okay.
So 1971 plus 50 years brings us to 2021. So that's the third cycle. So we have the pendulum rejecting centralization. At the same time, rejecting institutions, right? At the same time, we have this fourth turning where decades happen in days. And then at the same time, we have a technology now that I believe, I'm a big Bitcoin guy. I got it on my wall. Bitcoin is so much bigger than anybody realizes. And the smarter you are, the harder time you have to grasp it. And the reason why is because you're like, oh yeah, it's kind of like money. I get that. Oh yeah, it's kind of like digital gold. Yeah, I get that. Oh, it's kind of like a new form. Oh yeah, I get that. Like, no, you don't. I've been studying it for 7 years and I still don't get it. It's a technological revolution that we don't understand how deep it is. And from a high level, what it is it's a way to decentralize everything. So it's a way, and it's not just money. We're starting to see now on layer 2 applications. Now we're doing text, peer-to-peer text, voice, video, purely decentralized on the most secure computer network in the history of the world. So I think that we have this global shift, this 80-year pendulum shift, rejecting centralization, going back to decentralization. We have a fourth turning where change happens fast, and we have a technological revolution to decentralize the world all at the same time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The process gets messy.
The process gets messy.
I haven't read the one book you're referring to, but when you're going from a centralized process, the easiest thing to use as an example is just when the Berlin Wall came down. Remember how that process with them going from communism, Russia and the Eastern Bloc there, they moving from communism to more of a capitalist. You could argue how much free market capitalism actually have, but that was a very messy process, and it takes decades, and it doesn't go as smooth as maybe someone would like. So how do you see this process playing out? I would assume that you believe that Bitcoin is going to be the future of money, and it's going to be transactional, or maybe you don't. I don't put words in your mouth.
Not just the future of money. See, I think that just makes it too small, right? It's the foundation for the new system.
Yeah, for decentralized, right? Because we don't need banks, we don't need.
But it's not just money, right? So what do I mean by that? So the internet is the internet of information, right? We can transfer information. The problem with the internet is that it's been taken over, and so everything's become centralized. So today, first graders in school are on Google Chromebooks, right? The first thing they know about the world is Google.
Right.
And then they go on to social media, and then they have on YouTube. So all we have is these centralized institutions. That's all they know. Their money is PayPal or Venmo, but that's a centralized institution that still works under the bank. And so the internet was good at transferring information, but then it kind of got captured because of these centralized institutions. And as we know, remember, the whole world was moving to centralization. So the central bank, the Fed, all those things. And my quote that I like to say all the time is that centralization always leads to manipulation.
Yeah, right.
And that's the problem with gold, right? They centralized the gold, and then they just printed a bunch of fiat off of it. And so the way that I kind of see this shaking out now, as to your point, it doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen quickly in the fourth turning. But even still, if you go back and study, when the dollar took over reserve currency status from the sterling, it was about a 30 to 40 year process. So it's a messy process, to your point. I believe this will play out over the next decade, and it again coincides with the WEF's goal. They have a decade-long goal as well, right? So by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. And so it's a process. But what I'm seeing is that, I guess, to kind of set the stage a little bit, the way that the internet changed information as we know it. So what do I mean by that? So before the internet, information was probably just considered what I got in the newspaper in the morning and what I saw on my nightly news. Today, my idea of information is totally different. I might see somebody post a picture on the beach in Hawaii, and I got all this information of what the weather's like, what the waves are like, what the tide's like, if the conditions are good, right? And so now information's everywhere, and it's all around us, right?
Yeah, right.
And I believe that the way that we view wealth will also change, right? And value, and or maybe the word value. So I like to kind of interchange the word money for value. Like, how do I store my value, right? What's gold? A store of value, if you think about it like that. And so a couple things. One, think about this for a second. Like, since all of humanity, since you and I were the first two people on Earth, I was afraid you're going to come kill me and take my chickens. So you and I band together, and now those people are going to come take our chickens and our goats. So a village forms, and now that village is going to come take our wealth, and then a kingdom's form, and then they come steal our gold. And then what's the role of the government? To protect the people. Protect the people from what? From another country coming and stealing our wealth. Imagine the shift in humanity when I can store all my wealth cryptographically, and I know 12 words in my head. No one can take it. It doesn't cost me any money to secure it. I don't need an army, and I can take it with me anywhere I go. Like, if you just take that and then fast forward that, imagine back to like we walked for 5,000 years and then we had a car. For all of humanity, we've had to struggle to store our value so someone doesn't steal it. And now I don't have that problem anymore. Like it's it's a massive shift to think about. And then if you think about like, under the last election, the active sitting president got kicked off of all the social media platforms, what we may consider town squares or whatever, communications. And an active sitting president, your friend Robert Barnes, I heard him say, if they can do that to an active sitting president, imagine what they can do to you, right? Yeah. And then everyone left Twitter, and then they went to Rumble, and then Apple and Google kicked them out of the Play Store, and then Amazon kicked them off the web servers.
Right.
And what did people say? You probably saw some of these comments like, well, they're private companies, they can do that. Okay, so I should go build my own app. Well, those are the Play Stores. The iTunes Play Store is private. Okay, I'll go build my own Play Store. Well, the iPhone. Oh, then I'll go build my iPhone. And then they got kicked off of the internet. So do I have to go build my own internet? The answer is yes. And the answer is it's there right now. Bitcoin is not just a new form of money. It's a new decentralized platform to build the whole world's value on. And it's being done right now. So as I said, we already have applications today where I can send you chat messages peer-to-peer, like Bitcoin, but not going through Telegram or Signal servers, peer-to-peer.
Yeah. So I understand how that increases freedom, which is something that we should all.
But I believe it's the foundation. So, if you have a question, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Where I try to connect the dots is try to say, let's assume that, because what you're doing is you're solving a problem of centralization with communication, whether it's with Facebook, whether it's with Twitter, whether it's with YouTube, what have you. And it would be great to be able to solve those problems. But let's just say for a moment, we woke up tomorrow morning and those problems were solved. Then so the next step is, how does that allow us to create more goods and services?
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that's how we become more wealthy. Going back to,
I think
that was our earlier interview where we were talking.
It's a little bit of a long way around. It's not a one for one, because as we talked about in our previous conversation, it's hard to really trace down all the effects that this fiat money system or central banking has, right? But one of the big ways that it affects things, as we discussed earlier, is that it takes productivity away. Right now, I'm forced to be this. I'm forced to deal with this centralization. I'm forced to deal with my money supply evaporating. I'm forced to be an investor, and it's taking away productivity. Right, so that's a big one. So it's kind of an indirect way. But let me say this. So like right now, what's happening? I talked about how steel was part of the technological revolution in the 1800s. Steel, and steel gave us the hardest asset, the hardest. Whatever it is, commodity, it is new technology that allowed us to build new institutions, new bridges, new buildings. So it allowed the harder the material. Before that, we were using brick, right? So we could only go so big. Now we have steel.
4 stories, I think it was.
What's that?
I think brick only allowed you to go 4 stories.
Yeah. So now when we have a new base, we can build new things. So what's happening is now that we have this new decentralized system that can't be censored, you can't be shut down, you can't be censored, you can't be stopped, can't be blocked. It's allowing us to start building new things. And so what we're already starting to see is a massive amount of freedom-loving patriots, free thinkers are coming over and starting to build new things on this new platform right now. Now, if we went back, you and I are having this conversation in 1996 or 1997, and we'd be discussing the internet, and I know you're old enough to remember this, it was like, I guess we could go onto like chat boards and we could send electronic messages. We might have envisioned a world that maybe one day we bought products online. Although I started an e-commerce business in 2001 and I literally got laughed out the door. People told me they wouldn't even sell me their products. No one would ever buy anything online. That was in 2001. So 1997, it was like chat rooms and email. We never would have imagined that my car would be hooked to something called a cloud, using something called social media to navigate me around traffic in real time. Because we didn't have any of those building blocks, but we needed that foundation to attract people to build. So if we're already starting to see people come, and now they're starting to, I think you would agree that the system is the system is corrupt, right? And there's really no saving it. And so that's the political system, that's the monetary system, but it's also the education system. It's also the health system. Like, you're not going to go fix those things. And so rather than trying to fix those things, it's being built in parallel right now today. So with this new foundation, we're already starting to see people coming and create new systems. So for example, there's a guy right now setting up decentralized farming. I can hire someone to raise a cow for me right now, getting around all the FDA regulations because they're not selling me meat. They're just raising an animal for me. They're setting up decentralized education, pods of 15 students, right? Everyone's doing homeschool today. Doctors that are now providing medical care on a private basis. You're probably like me. I pay a lot of money for health insurance, but I still pretty much pay out of pocket for everything. So I want better care.
Right.
And so we're starting to see people, back to the Atlas Shrugged we talked about before, people are leaving one system to go to the new system that's like steel that they can build on. And so it's more about the long-term effects. Just what fiat does, it takes it away. It takes away productivity. It takes away ingenuity. It takes away communication. The communication is how we share ideas, and we vet ideas, and it sparks imagination, and I go build off of that. So fiat is like a reverse flywheel, right? It takes away. This is a flywheel that builds up. And so while I would agree with you, it's hard to see right now a one-to-one return. You have to have a little bit of imagination, kind of using the internet example, and realize, like, if we have a place we can share ideas and we can't be censored, and there's more freedom and more creativity, and all this new stuff can be built and it can't be taken away.
Yeah, I totally understand the advantages. And even if it doesn't increase productivity, and it increases personal freedom and our ability to
but wouldn't you say, George, that personal freedom does increase productivity?
Yeah, I would. But I think the thing that moves the needle even more is the fact that hopefully Bitcoin would be, from a philosophical standpoint, if it pans out, it's able to create hard money, sound money, that's base money that the government, and it takes that power away from them, so we could go back to a system like we had in the 1800s, where it was privatized. Now, even though back in the 1800s it was more centralized, but it was private, I think in a Bitcoin world it would be even further decentralized, because you wouldn't even need a bank. I think that they would still exist to some degree because people would want a return on their Bitcoin. But see, the thing there, it is the Bitcoin that allows for deflation to actually take place, which is the benefit. But the benefit there really is deflation. The benefit is the free market actually being allowed to do what it does well, and not have the government intrusion. So I just want to point out to everyone that the problem still goes back to the fact that the rules and regulation and the overreaching of the government getting involved with the free market, that's the real problem right there.
So let me talk about that for a second. So it's clear, I would imagine, to anybody that's listening to this for sure, that the world, again, this pendulum is swinging to centralization. It's clear that we are moving to a more and more totalitarian world. Even in the free world, the free world, the U.S., the quote unquote free world, even in the free world, I mean, we're in a totalitarian regime. I mean, it's like YouTube's kicked off like 80,000 channels in the last like 6 months. I mean, it's amazing what's happening.
Well, they locked you in your house, Mark.
Yeah, exactly.
More totalitarian than that.
Right. And so, and then of course we can see China with their social credit system and all those types of things. So we're obviously moving into a way where a scary world where technology could really create this like perfect prison, almost like a Matrix type world. So I think it's obvious to anybody that we're trending towards that. And I would ask anybody, what changes that trend? Do the governments wake up one day and go, we have too much power and control. Why don't we give some freedom back to the people? And I would think anybody would laugh at that. Of course, that would never happen, right? I would say that again, right? We can get caught up in all these complex subjects, but if we break them down simply, We have socialism and fascism and communism and capitalism. And what are all these isms? I don't even know, right? Words get lost in meanings. What I would say is that we break them down simply. There's only two systems. There's one that's either a captured, controlled, centrally planned system, or there's a free, open, competitive system. That's it. And there's obviously blends of those, but those are the two competing systems. And everyone knows that competition always leads to better products, better services, and better prices. It's always competition. Free, good ideas win on competition. Socialism wins because you suppress things. So back to my point, we're moving towards this totalitarian nightmare where technology's created this perfect prison. What reverses that? Well, in my opinion, I don't think it's my AR-15 that I have, because that ain't going to work against nukes and jet pilots, right? I believe what changes that is competition. So think about this for a second, George. So you and I are about the same age. When I was growing up, I'm sure you had the same. I had many friends who came from Iran, Afghanistan. My best friends came from South Africa. They all left oppressive regimes to come to the land of the free. When they came penniless. They couldn't get any money out of the banks, couldn't take their gold, couldn't take their real estate. They came penniless, but they still came nevertheless because it was worth it for them. U.S. outcompeted those countries. We're seeing the same thing. I left California. New York is leaving. New York's fleeing to Florida. Texas is outcompeting California. Texas has taken every good company, every good employee out of California. And what's happening in California right now? The governor's being recalled. And not only that, Chamath, who's neither one of our best friends, said he's going to put his hat in the ring to run for governor. And he said he's going to drop state taxes to zero. So my point isn't whether that succeeds or not. My point is that people recognize California is being outcompeted, and they're being maybe forced to try to change their ways. But imagine when countries can start competing for each other. So imagine if the U.S. gets so totalitarian lockdown, doesn't allow us to open up our businesses anymore. And another country's like, hey, over here, now you're jumping around countries like I am. So we're both on this, right? What if another country says, hey, you can come over here. We're free. You can open up a business. Well, I would want to go there. But what if the U.S. doesn't let me get my money out of the bank? What if they don't let me get my gold out of the country? What if they don't let me take my real estate with me, which of course they won't. They can't. I can't really go to live in St. Bart's if I don't have $1 million. So what good does it do me if I leave the country?
You get a lot more than that live in St. Bart's.
Yeah, right. Right. But what good does it do? What good does it do if I leave the country, but they keep all my wealth, right? But imagine a world where I can take my wealth with me, right? 12 words and sweet seed phrase in my head. What does that do to the competition aspect? Now more people go. Other countries are like, well, shoot, we're open too. More people go. Hey, we're open too. And then soon enough, those countries are going to be like, shoot, we better lighten up our regulations or we're dead in the water. Now, this may seem far-fetched, but just take a look at China, right? Under Mao, they went full communist and they realized that they were dead in the water on the global stage. They introduced a little bit of capitalism, right? With their free ports and things like that. And look at what happened. A little bit of capitalism. They realized that they had to open up to a little bit of capitalism or they're dead. And so we can see, again, through history, competition always wins. And I believe that Bitcoin is that catalyst to really start developing that competition.
Let me turn the table.
Yeah.
Ask what's hopefully an interesting question. If I put you in charge of the World Economic Forum, or if I put you in charge, let's say I brainwashed you like Zoolander. Remember that?
So not me, but if I was evil on the other side.
Okay. Yeah, if you were evil, Mark Moss, like that Superman movie, or I put you in charge of the United States or something like this, how would you prevent that from happening? How would you prevent that competition? How would you prevent people like the producers, like John Galt in Atlas Shrugged, just leaving and going somewhere else with their decentralized money?
Well, you do it through force, right? They're already doing it, right? So you'd get the World Health Organization. I think last week, I want to say there was 70 or 80 countries that have signed on to this pact now with the World Health Organization, that they're all going to follow the same health guidelines or whatever. So
they're just paying taxes too.
Yeah, they're doing it with taxes. So you're going to create these you're going to create these organizations and create these pacts where the whole world, globalism again, right? The whole world has to act as one, right? Has to act in unison. So whether that be on health, so now, hey, we can't travel. It's a health emergency. You don't have no one's even allowed to leave. It's a climate emergency. You're not allowed to fly anymore. It's a tax thing through the IMF, and now all countries have to, tax the same. And so that's how you prevent that, right? You lock it down. No different than obviously what's happened throughout history again, right? Capital control laws first, right? Control the capital, and then control the people. You mentioned the Berlin Wall earlier, right? Put a fence up, right, with guns. And so those would be the things that you would do to prevent it. And they're doing it.
Yeah. So how do you see that playing out? That was my next
Well,
question.
I see it playing out in two ways. One, not everybody goes along with that. And so then it's a little bit of a game of what we'd call game theory. So the country that opts out of that is going to have massive success. Back to China, right? They were full communist, the strictest communist country, and they had to let a little bit of freedom. So the country or the countries that don't opt in on that, and we've seen it, right? In Belarus, the dictator there, he's not no saint, but he's like, I'm not shutting my country down. There were several countries, not a lot, but they didn't play along. And so those countries will start to outcompete. Those will be the shining spotlights, and people will go there. Now, I guess in my evil dictator mind, the goal would be to stamp all of that out and make sure every single country plays along. But I don't know how realistic that is. I know you've talked about, some of the Eastern Soviet countries. I mean, they just came out of communism. They don't want to go back into it. So I think that's going to be, that's one risk. The other way, though, that I would add to that would be that in a roundabout way, we're chopping them at the knees. We're defunding the government. And so, I guess we're not really fractional banking anymore. Now we're just print as much dollars as you want. But at the end of the day, fiat money doesn't mean anything, to your point. And so I think by taking our wealth out of the system and not playing that game anymore, we can defund that movement and we can go build this alternative system over here. So now we can have this.
I'm sorry. Do you think they'll tax in Bitcoin though?
Well, I think, in my opinion, at least right now, Bitcoin is not a way to evade taxes. Bitcoin is taxed like property. So it's taxed just like stocks. It's taxed just like gold. So I could store my wealth in gold and I could store it in Bitcoin, or I could store it in Amazon stock. From a tax perspective, it's the same.
I know they'll tax the capital gains, and I'm not saying that you're a tax expert, or I'm not telling anyone to look at either of us for tax advice. But I'm saying that if we were using Bitcoin from a transactional standpoint, and it was truly competing with the dollar or XYZ currency, do you think the governments would start to demand that taxes be paid in Bitcoin?
Well, they already do, though. I don't know. So if I were to buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin today, I would have to pay tax on that transaction. That's a taxable transaction. So it already is.
Yeah, but you're paying but what's going to the government is dollars. That's my point. Do you think when do you think we get to a point where
so I'm sure you saw the city of Miami has put the Bitcoin white paper up in the city hall, and Francis Suarez had said that now they can pay city employees in Bitcoin, and residents of Miami can pay their city fees in Bitcoin now. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
So that's the city of Miami. I think that's the second largest state in Florida. So that's a trend, right? Patrick McHenry, he's the head of the Financial Services Committee. Now, there's a bunch of committees, obviously agriculture and this and that, right? But he's the Financial Services Committee, and he's a Bitcoiner. And he said there's no way the government can shut Bitcoin down. So, we have this level of entrenchment in government. But I guess if we chase that down, the thought of the U.S. government, or any government for that matter, deciding to okay, we're no longer going to use the dollar. Let's move everything to Bitcoin, and now you pay your fees in Bitcoin. I don't know. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well,
I see a parallel system.
If they already, and I guarantee, yeah, I totally agree, it won't happen soon. But I'm thinking in a situation in which they know they lost the war, the dollar's lost to Bitcoin, but there's going to be a lot of people that just choose not to leave East Berlin, let's say. And for those people, if the government, and this is past the point where they try to ban Bitcoin or something like that, then they say, okay, fine, we'll just submit to it. It's already won. It's won the competition, to your point. but we need to tax it. So, or tax your earnings, and you're earning Bitcoin. And therefore, instead of taxing you 40% of the dollars you're earning, we'll go ahead and tax 40% of the Bitcoin you earn. Where at the end of the day, they're just taxing 40, 50, 60, 70% of your output.
Well, first thing I would say, just to kind of flip this perspective a little bit, is that the dollar's already lost. I posted a tweet yesterday, and it showed more money has flowed into the stock market, I think, this quarter than like any time in history. Nobody will hold the dollar. The dollar's already lost. It's like the dollar's a sinking ship. The rats are jumping off, and they're driving asset prices higher than we've ever imagined. Real estate, gold, Bitcoin, stocks, Amazon, Coinbase yesterday or whatever. So I would say, to your point, the dollar's already lost. Nobody will hold the friggin' dollar. Now, do we still use it to transact? Sure. So I can sell a little bit of my Amazon stock for dollars and pay my taxes. I could sell a little bit of my gold. I could sell a little bit of my Bitcoin. What's the difference?
Yeah. I mean, it's like a small version of Gresham's Law, or maybe it's the beginning of Gresham's Law, where everyone is just saying, okay, these dollars aren't doing me much right now. I need to trade them in on something, some commodities, the Bitcoin, gold, stocks, cars. I mean, used cars, I read the other day, have gone up by 20% in the last 12 months. And in fact, as a story, you guys know how I like to buy trucks, or I did. And I still have those alerts that come to my phone. I just usually don't pay any attention to them. But this morning, I woke up at like 6:30 in the morning. I just randomly clicked one of my alerts, and it was the best deal I have ever seen in my life, to the point where I was going to call the guy, but it was like 5 a.m. his time, and the ad had only been up for 8 hours. I mean, it was a smoking deal. But sure enough, just in fact, when we were on this conversation, I saw he text me and said it's already sold. So the ad was up for 8 hours, and just boom, done. And it wasn't like it was half price. It was just a reasonably good deal. But my point, all these things are just being bought up, and that will probably increase in the future. But what's interesting, though, is there's two. I like to compartmentalize the dollar. So you've got the domestic dollar, and that's in relation to goods, services, and assets denominated in dollars. But then you've got the foreign dollar, the Eurodollar market as well, where there's so much dollar denominated debt, and that in and of itself creates demand for future dollars. And then if you think about the interest rates being low, that incentivizes future debt being issued in dollars, therefore creating more demand. So you've got that push pull, and I don't know how that plays out. I don't think anybody does, but it's very interesting to kind of think that through, because the dollar isn't going up or down just in relation to the stuff you and I buy every day using dollars. It's also going up or down in relationship to other currencies, which would be in relationship to other goods and services that we may be exporting or importing. There's a lot of cross currents there.
What I would say, though, just like if you zoom out on that, back to my point, the dollar's already done. I mean, nobody wants to hold the dollar as it is, and not just you and I buying used trucks or real estate or gold or Bitcoin or Amazon or Coinbase stock on a global level. I mean, reserve currency exchanges are down. I mean, I think just above 50% right now. The world is de-dollarizing at a pretty rapid pace. China is accelerating their CBDC. They're expecting to have a full scale launch by the Olympics in 2022. And I just did a video about how China's attacking the U.S. currency, and their goal, they're spreading that all throughout the whole Belt and Road Initiative, all those things. That's a deep subject to get into. But the point is that I get what you're saying, but that is falling apart at a rapid pace. The world is de-dollarizing pretty quickly. I understand the amount of debt and the amount of currency. There's whatever, is it 300 trillion in US denominated debt and only 80 or 90 trillion in currency. So as long as those are out of balance, there's always going to be demand for US dollars.
Yeah, velocity plays into that.
I get that argument, but I would just say that at the end of the day, I think you agree with me that fiat money, the dollar, is backed by trust. So people say it's backed by the U.S. military. It's backed by the petrodollar. I don't believe those things. Venezuela had a military, and the people still didn't use the Venezuelan dollar. And so no force, the Roman Empire had an army, and they still collapsed because money isn't wealth, right? So the only reason why the only reason why anything has value is trust, right? So we trust that dollar, and we've seen the trust just plummeting in the US dollar. I would say the market's telling us that. We watched the Dixie crash, and I say crash, it crashed almost as far and twice as fast as the planned crash in 2016, the Shanghai Accord. So I would call that a crash. I would say trust is plummeting. The world's de-dollarizing. China's eating its lunch, and even in America, nobody wants to hold them.
Yeah, but at the same time, the dollar's gone down like 8% on the Dixie.
8%. But here, I think it was Mises said that in the world of economics, there's no such thing as a constant. And he was right, because houses are always changing. The supply of oil is always changing. Gold's always changing. Gold was money at the time. Dollars are always changing. He said, in the world of economics, there's no such thing as a constant. So basically what that means is all prices are always measured against each other, right? Everything's sliding up and down.
Currency there, right?
Well, all economics. I mean, because everything's always changing. The only constant, but I think that's changed. I think we have a constant today. 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. And so if you measure things, you can say the dollar's gone down 8%. 8% compared to what?
I was talking about other currencies.
It's gone down 30% compared to real estate in Southern California. It's gone
down about 1,000,000% compared to Bitcoin.
Right. And that's my point. So it's gone down 8% compared to what? Compared to the euro? Like, so sure, if I'm looking at as a basket of currencies on the Dixie, okay, but what about if I measure it in used trucks? What if I measure it in cars? What if I measure it in gold? Like, it's gone down a lot more than that.
Yeah, there's so many deflationary pressures that that should play out in a free market. And what do I mean by that is if the government wasn't creating so much additional money supply, and to create the environment that you're referring to, with as much debt as we have in the system, especially with what happened in 2020, that the system would be deflationary. It would want, especially asset prices, would really, really, really want to deflate. Right. And therefore the dollar would be going up in value against those asset prices. So again, these are the cross currents that I think that people should really be thinking through and try to predict the probabilities for themselves. But they need to understand that there are no certainties. No. And that they've got to think these things through, and you can't just whistle by the graveyard and just put your money in a 60-40 risk parity portfolio because your financial advisor tells you to, right? And then just assume to wake up in 20 years and be a millionaire. No. It's not going to happen. One thing I wanted to ask you, Mark, you talked about the cycle changing right now because of the power that Bitcoin and decentralized finance is giving us. And that was fascinating. Do you recall with those books that you read, what prompted this change in cycles in the past when we went from more centralization to more decentralization?
Well, I would say like
usually a war that triggered that, or what was normally the
I don't think it's normally war. What it is it's things reverting to the mean. Right. So if you look at prices are always reverting. They get overextended, overbought, oversold. And I think it's like bowling, and I take my kids bowling and they put the bumpers up, and the ball just kind of ding, ding, ding. And I think it goes too far to one way, too far to centralization. And the people just like, no way, this is way too much. We reject this. And then it goes back, and then it reverts too far, and it goes to decentralization where everything's a big mess. And I think it's more about just reverting to that mean. It's not about being on one extreme or the other. It's about, finding that middle ground, I think.
Yeah. So maybe there's not a catalyst. Maybe that analogy of the pendulum, where the reason it starts going back the other way is not necessarily because something big happens. It just loses momentum. And then kind of,
Well, I think it's actively being rejected, right? Back to the fourth turning, right? The bad time, the weak men bring bad times. The people don't want that anymore. And so during those bad times, strong men have to stand up to lead the charge.
yeah, because those ideas of the central planners maybe are being rejected because they're losing momentum to
Right.
that point, like that pendulum coming back.
Yeah.
Well, Matt,
The
go ahead.
problem that we have is we have human nature. And I
Yeah,
believe,
right.
and that's not really a cycle, but like, unfortunately, there's like, at all levels, whether that's my neighborhood association or the parent teachers association or local city or president, like there's people that just want to control people.
Mm,
And then you have like, human greed,
yeah.
and things like that. And I think, you're always, once they start getting that power, was it Milton Friedman that said there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And so once they get that power, they're just going to want more and more and more, and that's just humanity. And so I think that also kind of leads into those cycles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's why I've said that I sure hope Bitcoin takes us, or something takes us into this new cycle of decentralization. But I think I forgot what I said on Twitter the other day. It was something to the effect that even perfect money will behave imperfectly if it's controlled by imperfect human beings in an imperfect world. And what I meant by that is, even if we go to, if things really dramatically improve as a result, let's say in the next 10, the next 20, the next 30 years, I do believe that if you look at the crystal ball at the next 50, 60, 70 years, that even with what we're talking about, we'll revert back to the same cycles.
The pendulum will swing.
Right.
The
Yep,
pendulum will swing. I would agree with that. I mean, history tells us that you're right. Obviously, the pendulum will swing back the other way. We have 80 years to go one way before it rejects and comes back. But to the quote that you just made, though, money controlled by imperfect people, and that's the whole thing. It's not controlled by anybody. And so we have humanity, we have human nature, but you take it out. You have code. Nobody can control it. Now, you can try to set rules on how people interact with it, but at the end of the day, nobody can control the base network. And so
that's not what I was referring to. What I was referring to, let's say, is, well, let's go back to 21 million Bitcoin. And I would argue less every single year, because people lose it and whatnot.
That's a fully diluted supply or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah. So let's just say that's what it is. And people are really freaked out because of what has happened with the overcreation of money. So for the next 10 years, everyone's like, nope, we're not doing this fractional reserve thing. We're going to do full reserve lending with Bitcoin, and it's going to be decentralized, peer-to-peer, or maybe it'll be slightly centralized with a private equity firm or an angel investor or something like that, where you want to get a little bit more return on your money and you don't have the time to focus on these investments. But it's only being lent out on a full reserve basis,
or even fractional.
Right. But see, then I think we get to, oh, well, now let's go ahead and do fractional reserve.
Sure.
And then once we go to fractional reserve, well, now let's go ahead and do derivatives.
Sure.
And let's get into swap lines, and let's do this with Bitcoin. And pretty soon you're back to the point where we are today, that's caused so many of these problems. But even though we started with perfect money, that, to your point, no group controls, but the individual controls the Bitcoin they own.
I would say that doesn't happen, though. So to your point, yeah, we could easily have fractional reserve. We already do, right? So already people are centralizing their Bitcoin onto exchanges and they're loaning those back out. It's mostly over collateralized lending at this point. But let's play that forward. Back to you earlier, we were talking about free banking, and before the central reserve, there was just a bunch of independent banks. Free market was working, and they were creating these fractional reserves. So okay, so if you want to deposit your coins there, and they're fractional reserving them out, okay. I understand that they're paying me, like with BlockFi, they're paying me, 8.5% on my Bitcoin, and I know they're loaning it back out. So am I taking my own personal responsibility okay with that risk? Am I okay knowing that they're loaning those out for the return of the 8.5%? I make that personal decision. If they go bust and I lose my Bitcoin, that's on me. I think the difference is that we don't have a central bank. And I know you did a video on the Cantillon effect, right? And so the problem is, well, there's lots of problems, but the Federal Reserve with the ability to create money creates the Cantillon effect, which creates all this inequality. And the difference here is that no one can create more Bitcoin.
Yeah, but we can do it in a fractional reserve way. You can't create more base money.
But here's the other piece I would throw in that. So the reason why gold failed, and gold was money for 5,000 years or however long you want to claim it. But the problem with gold, it was too big, it's too heavy. And because of that, it led to centralization. I'll put it in a bank. The bank gives me paper gold certificates. Remember I said earlier, centralization always leads to manipulation. So once they got the gold, they were able to distort the whole thing. The difference here, I guess, would be the ability for me to self-custody my own coins. And not only am I able to self-custody them, the functions of a bank really are three parts, right? One, storage, two, payments, and three, lending. And so if I can store it myself and pay and send and receive payments myself, then I have control of that. And instead of me giving it to the bank and allowing them to run away with this fractional reserve system.
Yeah.
So the old system requires that centralization. The new system is decentralized. I am my own bank. Now, will some people do that and offer me 8.5% like BlockFi? Sure. But most people don't participate in that. I certainly don't have to. You can do that and lose your money. Maybe not, but I don't have to. And I think that is the big difference. It's decentralized and it doesn't allow them to capture the system and run away with it. And I think that is what will always keep them in check.
Yeah, I get it. I just think the probabilities are that it won't always keep them in. That always is the word that I struggle with. I think 10, 20 years definitely, but always that's a tough pill for me to swallow. Although I would love to see it happen. I mean, I think that eventually, even with Bitcoin, you get to a centralized type of issue. And I don't know how you get there. I don't know if it's war. I don't know if it's forced coercion. I don't know if it's through taxing Bitcoin, where you have to pay your taxes in Bitcoin. Therefore, more of it's centralized to the government. I don't know how they get there, Mark.
But I would say, so two things I would say to that. One, I think, like I said, it's a technological revolution. So just like I look at this as not just a new money, it's like the internet itself, right? Where this changes the way humanity works. And so I would say it's bigger than that. And to your point, the internet was centralized, right? It was captured and taken over. And so, there's always going to be people trying to control, back to that humanity thing. So I think we're always going to have that. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But here's where I put the second piece in, and that's back to the competition. And I believe it's competition that always beats central planning. And so if we can, by me being able to hold my wealth, protect my wealth, and move my wealth anywhere in the world, I hope that it keeps that competition loop open. And I believe as long as the competition loop is open, better service, better product, better prices, I believe that competition is what, if we can keep our value, the competition loop stays open, and the competition loop will always provide a free place in the world. I hope. That's my hope. I don't, let me say this, George. I don't see any other solution. Not one.
I agree.
And that's why I'm all in on Bitcoin, because I know this might sound a little hyped, but I'm at the point where, like, I don't see another solution, George. And if this fails, we're doomed, man.
Yeah. No, I hope we're not doomed, but I completely agree that this is, our best alternative, along with other things, along with things that you're doing as far as getting the word out, spreading the message, waking people up to what's happening with the centralization and these cycles. I mean, that's really the most important part at the end of the day, and as far as I'm concerned. But we definitely agree on, the next few decades. And if we have any disagreement whatsoever, it's just what may happen, or the probabilities of what would happen in 50 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a huge disagreement, but Mark, I think we've gone over, buddy. I sincerely appreciate your time. Now, I want to let everyone know that you are going to be one of the main speakers at Rebel Capitalist Live. That's my conference that I'm doing, an actual live conference, not over Zoom. It's where people are face to face, enjoying each other's company, fellow rebel capitalists, if you will, getting to network with each other, and really feed off one another's ideas. But you're going to have some amazing speakers there that are going to provide immense amounts of value, like you always do, and share some things that people might not have heard of before. So I don't know if you can give a little bit of or I think you might be talking about some of the things that we discussed here, but in much more extensive fashion. So can you give us some insight there?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, George. And I'm so looking forward to that. You and I did a meetup maybe 7 months ago, and it was just super fun. So I can't wait to see. I know we have a lot of overlap in our audience, so I can't wait to see everybody and hang out with everybody. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm going to be taking this thesis, but really breaking it down, bringing the charts, bringing the numbers, bringing some of these facts, so you can like walk away really armed. But more importantly, I don't want to leave you hanging, going, great. Now what? I want to give you the playbook of what do you do now to see this thesis play out. I believe it's, at least a 10-year thesis. George and I were talking 30 years or 50 years or whatever, but this thesis that all these cycles converging. So I want to give you the game plan that I'm following, that I'm watching for. And again, to your point, these are probabilities. We don't have crystal balls, unfortunately. It'd make things so much easier. But so I'm gonna finish this off, give you the details, give you the numbers, the charts, the facts, but then give you the answers, the playbook to follow.
Yeah, and you're going to reveal those actionable items that people can use in their life right now to build wealth and thrive in a world of out of control central banks and big governments.
That's right. Hopefully not much longer.
That's right, baby. That's right. All right, Mark. And that's at rebelcapitalistlive.com. You guys can get your tickets. And I would suggest doing so. Number one, it's still the early bird special. Number two, we've got a max of about 500 attendees due to the size of the hotel. And we're already at about 325. So if you want to join Mark and I, along with some amazing other speakers and fellow Rebel Capitalists, definitely do that right now at rebelcapitalistlive.com. But Mark, for my viewers who want to find out more about what you do, tell them about your YouTube channel, tell them about all you do on social media and your website.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, George. So I have another channel. Just you can find me on YouTube, Mark Moss. And if you like hearing any of these kind of topics like we were digging into, that's what you're going to find. Macroeconomics, social economics, history lessons, and so much more. So definitely find me there. I'm pretty active there. I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. Just the number one, Mark Moss. And if I could take a second to plug, I about maybe once a month, every 6 weeks, I like to do a live event, because my YouTube videos I try to keep to about 20 minutes. So I do have a live event coming up that I'm going to kind of go deep into kind of this heads you win, tails you win kind of a scenario. And so maybe we can put a link to that as well.
What's you mean a live stream?
I'm going to do a live stream, where I can go deep. Unfortunately, I can't say everything I want to say on YouTube, and sometimes you want to go deeper into subjects. So about once every 4 to 6 weeks, I do like a live offline where I can kind of say more things I want to say and go a little deeper. So I have that coming up as well. But other than that, follow me on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And hopefully I see you at Rebel Capitalist Live, because I'm really looking forward to being with George, everyone else, and I love meeting all of you.
Awesome, Mark. Thanks for your time, my friend. I cannot wait to do it again.
Yeah, thanks so much, George.
Hi, guys. I'd like to invite each and every one of you to join me in Miami this June 11th through the 13th for Rebel Capitalist Live, the investment conference. And this is not over Zoom. This is face-to-face. I'm bringing a lot of your favorites from the Rebel Capitalist Show to Miami under one roof to speak, to give you the knowledge you need to increase your personal freedom, to become a better investor and make larger returns over the next few years when we have this financial uncertainty that's being caused by the Fed and the government. And finally, it's going to give you an opportunity to really take your understanding of macroeconomics and the world around us to the next level. We've got some incredible speakers lined up that are going to completely blow you away. People like Mike Maloney, Jason Hartman, Ken McElroy, Lynette Zhang, Mark Moss, Brent Johnson, Jeff Snider, just to name a few. The tickets for this event are really going to sell out fast, so make sure you go to Rebel Capitalist Live right now to get all the details and to reserve your spot. We need to come together as a group, as a community, especially after what we dealt with in 2020 and 2021, so we can learn how to build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments. And we need to do this as a group, as a community of fellow rebel capitalists. So don't waste any time. Head over to rebelcapitalistlive.com, and I will see you in Miami.